Among the most popular black market anabolic preparations, whatever you want to call it, are drugs that are known as SARMs. SARMs, S-A-R-M-S. SARM stands for selective androgen receptor modulator drugs. Now, what are SARMs? Okay, SARMs, the original SARMs were developed in the 40s, but they had some problems, and they never really became popular. They kind of like went on the back burner, and nothing happened with them. But the real emergence of SARMs occurred around the late 90s, around 1997, when a steroid chemist came up with the idea. What they were seeking were drugs that would interact with the androgen receptor. Now, there's only one type of androgen receptor. Unlike estrogen receptors, there's 2 or even 3 types of estrogen receptors. And what these are, these receptors interact with the hormones. As estrogen receptors interact with estrogen. And there's different types of estrogen. The androgen receptors interact mainly with testosterone and also with the byproduct of testosterone, which is dihydrotestosterone, also known as DHT. DHT is actually far more active at the level of the androgen receptor compared to testosterone itself. DHT binds to the androgen receptor 5 times with 5 times greater affinity compared to testosterone. However, testosterone is much more active in muscle. So as a matter of fact, dihydrotestosterone, when it gets in the muscle, it's actually deactivated by enzymes. However, steroid chemists, I know I'm getting off topic, I'll get to the SARMs in a second, you'll understand why I'm saying this, but the SARMs, the DHT, the steroid chemists took the DHT structure and they modified it, and they were able to produce a number of very popular anabolic steroids that are based on the DHT structure. But DHT itself is not active in muscle. However, just as a tangential, just for your information, a couple of years ago they discovered that when you exercise, whether you're a man or a woman, there is an enzyme in muscle that can convert the popular prohormone, if you want to call it, dehydroepiandrosterone, or DHEA. When you exercise, there is an enzyme located in muscle that can actually convert DHEA into DHT. It's a little known fact, but that's getting a little bit off topic. But let's get back to SARMs. Now, the SARMs were developed because they were looking for substances that can interact with the androgen receptor. And the problem with testosterone and anabolic steroids is while they interact with the androgen receptor, they also have other effects that are independent of the androgen receptor that can cause problems. Some of these things are termed androgenic side effects. For example, testosterone was thought to adversely affect the prostate gland. DHT is associated with male pattern baldness, possible prostate problems, so that has come into question in recent years. And of course, acne. DHT is very closely associated with acne. Most of the bodybuilders who use DHT-based steroids, sometimes they get raging cases of acne, particularly along the upper back. In fact, some medical journals look at that as a possible sign of heavy steroid use. It's called the DHT that results from, or DHT activity that results from using DHT-based drugs can cause a whopping case of acne, but using testosterone itself can also increase DHT, because testosterone is converted into DHT through the actions of the 5-alpha reductase enzymes. And there's ways to deal with that. You could use 5-alpha reductase blockers, such as finasteride, and dutasteride are 2 drugs that inhibit 5-alpha reductase. The problem, however, is that some people have problems with finasteride. It's normally prescribed to treat male pattern baldness. It was originally a prostate drug which was prescribed at a dosage of 5 milligrams. And then later on, it was used to treat male pattern baldness at a dosage of 1 milligram. Some men claim to have severe sexual problems when they take finasteride, so there's a little bit problematic. So to get around all this, the scientists in the late 90s decided to try and find substances. They looked at substances that would interact only with the androgen receptor, and the goal was to provide the anabolic effects of testosterone without the androgenic or other side effects associated with testosterone itself and anabolic steroids. Now, these SARMs, as they were called, selective androgen receptor modulators, would work only on the level of the androgen receptor, which would theoretically prevent some of the major problems, such as prostate problems and possibly cardiovascular problems, liver problems, which occur from taking oral steroids. All of this was the hope was that these SARMs would prevent that. Now, the guy the scientist that developed SARMs in the late 90s, got the idea of developing SARMs from two sources. First, there was the early SARMs I mentioned earlier that were developed in the 40s, but were never really used for one reason or another. And then they got the idea from existing drugs that worked very well on the estrogen receptor, and they were termed SARMs, selective estrogen receptor modulator drugs. Those of you who are into bodybuilding or who know about bodybuilding pharmacology probably recognize that probably the most famous of the SARMs is tamoxifen citrate, better known as Navadex. Navadex works by it's very similar in structure to estrogen, and it can interact with the estrogen receptor and more or less block the receptor. And by doing so, it cuts down a lot of the side effects or reduces a lot of the side effects associated with estrogen. The primary use of Navadex is to treat breast cancer, particularly postmenopausal or breast cancer in older women. But anyway, these scientists looked at SARMs and they kind of, did a couple of experiments and came out with the first SARMs drugs. Now, I should point out at this point, that's kind of redundant, I should point out that the Food and Drug Administration has never, this is an important point, they've never approved SARMs for sale. In other words, there's no reputable drug company in the entire world that sells SARMs legally. It's only available on the black market. And as I've written in my Applied Metabolics newsletter, when you get drugs on the black market, it's very comparable to playing a lottery, meaning in the sense that you could either get the real drug, you can get a drug that doesn't have the potency that it's supposed to have, meaning much less of the active ingredient, or in worst case scenario, that's not the worst case. The worst, you can also get you can also buy a black market drug that doesn't contain any drug at all, or you could substitute one drug for another. In other words, let's say you bought a decadurablin on the black market. A lot of times it's not decadurablin. It could be another drug like Winstrol or testosterone. And the worst problem, which I was alluding to earlier, was that the black market drugs are not often, but it's very possible, they're tainted. They can have heavy metals that can kill you. There's one guy who died who bought trenbolone on the black market. Unfortunately, it was contaminated with, don't ask me how, arsenic. And this guy was 30 years old in good health, and he died from using a black market trenbolone. And trenbolone is only available on the black market. It's not a legitimate drug either. It's not produced by any drug company. Why is it important for drugs to be produced by drug companies? Because, and believe me, I'm not a lover of drug companies. I hate their guts, especially the drug companies here in the United States. They grossly overcharge for all drugs. They're just grossly overcharged. They're nasty companies. But the one good thing about drug companies is that the drugs, by law, have to be produced under quality control, sterile conditions. So, in other words, you basically, when you buy a drug from a drug company or drug produced by a drug company, you're getting what you pay for. That's not true with black market drugs. In black market drugs, it's the wild, wild west. You don't know what the hell's in there. Related to SARMs, I've written, I think, at least 2, maybe 3 articles in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. And for those who want much more in-depth information on SARMs than I could present in any video, I suggest that you subscribe. You could read the articles about SARMs. I go into detail about every current SARMs available, and I'm not recommending it. I just give it out as information. But in one of those articles, I talked about a study where they purchased, I think it was, I don't remember how many, 20 or 25 SARMs online. They bought it on the black market, and they were analyzed, and it turned out that 50% of the SARMs that were bought on the internet were either mislabeled, didn't contain SARMs, some of them contained nothing. 50% were garbage. That's an important point. But the point I want to make in this video about SARMs, which is even more important, is the fact that a lot of these internet sites that sell SARMs, they give the false impression that SARMs are safe. You know, everybody knows that steroids can cause side effects. And in fact, there's an old axiom in the pharmaceutical science that a drug that doesn't have side effects is a drug that doesn't work. And steroids can have a number of side effects. A lot of it depends on time and dosage, how long you take the drug and how much you take the drug. The current bodybuilders today, especially the elite pro bodybuilders, I don't know if it's true. I don't live with these guys, but if the reports that I've heard are true about the dosages they're using, let me put it this way: these guys are not going to have a long life. And you could see, as I pointed out in one of the earlier videos I did here, there's been a rash of recent deaths among bodybuilders. Some of them are older bodybuilders, but some of them are ridiculously young. So anyway, but the point being that these sites that sell SARMs, if you read their advertising, whatever they write, on the sites, they give the impression that SARMs, the big advantage of SARMs is, unlike steroids, they are almost completely safe. They don't suppress natural testosterone production like most steroids and testosterone. When you take most steroids or testosterone, it suppresses a feedback mechanism where your body can sense that you're taking the drugs, and your body turns off your own testosterone production. And one of the advertising ploys used by SARMs companies that sell it on the internet, and again, I want to add, none of these companies, none of them are legitimate. For all you know, these SARMs can be made in somebody's bathtub in their basement. There's no guarantee of quality control, nothing. But they like to say that SARMs do not depress your natural testosterone production. Completely false. And they also lead people to believe that SARMs are safe. In other words, the general message that they're trying to get across is, here, take these SARMs drugs. You'll make the same muscle and strength gains you make on using anabolic steroids, whether injectable or oral, but you won't get the side effects. Again, false. So, I mean, here, just to give you an example, I just found these two recent studies that came out about side effects. All right, they were case studies. In other words, case studies involve one or two subjects. Most scientific studies, to be valid, have to involve, the more subjects, the better, hundreds of subjects. But, case studies basically give you an idea of the possibilities. In other words, they're like a warning sign. In other words, this might not happen to everyone, but it could happen based on what happened to the person in the study. This first study was published in a journal called Military Medicine, and it involved a military guy who he was 23 years old, and he showed up at a gastroenterology clinic with jaundice. He had decrease in appetite and itchiness. These are all signs of itchiness goes with jaundice, and jaundice indicates a severe inflammation of the liver. The jaundice is caused by the swelling of the liver, which doesn't allow the proper circulation of bile, which is created in the liver. It's also known as cholestasis, very common side effect with oral anabolic steroids. Anyway, he showed up here, and it turns out that this guy was not taking just one SARM. He was taking several. He was taking LGD 4033, RAD 140, and YK11 for 3 months before he showed up at the emergency room. And so it turns out what happened was he had a severe, without reading the whole study, I'm just going through it, he had a severe inflammation of the liver. Lucky for him, he got off it, and he was okay. In other words, he didn't have to have a liver transplant or anything like that. The second study, this was published in a journal called Cureus, C-U-R-E-U-S, and the title is Acute Myocarditis from the Use of Selective Androgen Receptor Modulator, RAD140. That's one of the more popular SARMs. It has a great reputation for building muscle size and strength. Of course, most people who use it, especially bodybuilders, never use the suggested amount. They always use more because it's the ideas in their heads is that the more you use, the greater the gains, but that also means the greater the chance of side effects. Anyway, this guy here, how old was he? 32 years old. He presented with complaints of shortness of breath on exertion that started 1 day earlier. It turns out that, anyway, to make a long story short, this guy was diagnosed as having myocarditis. Myocarditis has been in the news lately because a couple of young men, average age between 20 and 25, who had the COVID vaccines, had temporary myocarditis. For some reason, only shows up in young men. It didn't show up in older men, didn't show up in women. And contrary to what the anti-vaxxers are saying online, where they try and act like everybody who takes the COVID vaccine is going to get myocarditis, that's completely bull crap. The cases of myocarditis that resulted from COVID-19 were like 1 in 100,000. They were like tiny, but it did happen to several of them. It's what they call an idiosyncratic reaction. In other words, it's something that just happened with these particular individuals, had a bad reaction to the COVID vaccine. Myocarditis itself, I should also add, so people don't you understand, that the myocarditis that these young guys got after taking the COVID-19 injection was very short-lived and easily treated, and most importantly, it did not cause permanent damage. There's a couple of lunkheads online that are saying that these young guys that got permanent heart damage. That's complete crap. Check the journals. Don't listen to these idiots online. They're full of crap. But anyway, not me. I'm telling you the truth. Here, I got the journal right in my hands. Yeah, I'm not lying. Myocarditis, basically, what it means, very simply, it's an inflammation of the heart muscle. And, it's self-limiting. Usually it goes away. But in worst-case scenarios, it can cause some serious problems. If it gets really bad, it can cause heart failure, cardiogenic shock, and in worst-case scenario, you can die. But it's kind of rare. It can be caused by various things. It can be caused by infections, viral infections, bacterial infections, even protozoal infections like yeast. And it can be caused by non-infectious causes, such as cardiotoxins, which are toxins that are particularly damage the heart, chemotherapy medications, or other systemic illnesses. Anyway, acute myocarditis has a prevalence of, this is what I was saying, 10 to 22 cases per 100,000 persons annually, and that's regular. Now, I should also point out, testosterone and anabolic steroids have been associated in rare cases with myocarditis. That's already known. It doesn't happen very often. I don't know of any famous bodybuilder that ever got myocarditis from using any amount of anabolic steroids, but apparently some people have because it's been written up in medical journals. But this particular study, this case study, was the first study of somebody who took SARMs. The SARMs involved, again, was RAD140, also known as Testolone, sold on the black market on the internet. And his main symptom was a lot of shortness of breath because he had a heart inflammation. Let me see what I could see here. Basically, I'm trying to see. I think he was okay. Yeah, he recovered. They actually put him on anticoagulants and aspirin, I believe. Yeah, he recovered. Lucky he lived also. But my point in relating these two studies is the fact that the notion that SARMs is innocuous, like these BS SARMs selling sites say, and they don't cause side effects, and they're safe, it gives you the wrong impression. Again, like Paracelsus said many years ago, only the dose determines the poison, and there's always things such as what they call idiosyncratic reactions. In other words, a lot of times because of genetic differences, you never know how a drug's going to affect you. Now, for all I know, both of these guys in these two studies, maybe they had some sort of genetic quirk that made them react badly to using SARMs. Maybe there's a lot of other people that took these same SARMs and didn't have that. But again, that's not my point. My point is the notion that SARMs are safe is bogus. They are the drugs, and every drug comes with side effects. So I'm just doing this study to serve as a warning and a voice of reason, because I'm not involved in any SARS company. I don't recommend SARS. Personally, I wouldn't use any drug. This is speaking for myself, but I wouldn't use any drug that can be purchased only on the black market. That's just me, because you never know what you're getting. And I realize, I understand there's many people that purchase drugs online and nothing happens. Some of them, I'm sure that a lot of the drugs are genuine. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're all fake. But my personal feeling is I don't know who's making the drugs that are sold online. I don't know the quality control that's used, meaning I don't know the sanitary conditions under which these drugs are produced. I don't know if they come from China, which has the worst quality. Most of them do come from China, the worst quality control of drugs on the entire planet. So I personally, I'm not telling anyone what to do, but I mean, I wouldn't take the drugs now anyway. I have no reason to. But let's say I was younger and competing in bodybuilding. When I competed, they didn't have a black market. The drugs were all pharmaceutically pure. People like Arnold, all those guys in that era, they didn't have to take black market drugs. They didn't have to go through this garbage of wondering if the drug they're taking contained arsenic, because they all were made by legitimate pharmaceutical companies. But what I'm saying is, if the black market did exist when I competed years ago, I wouldn't have used them, because my health is more important to me. I won't take that risk. So that's about it. Again, if anyone wants to take SARMs, that's up to them. If you want to know how they work and how effective they are, I suggest subscribing to my Applied Metabolics newsletter, where I go into detail on every SARMs that's been produced thus far. I explain the characteristics, and I explain the possible effectiveness based on science. It's all evidence-based. And if you want more information on nutrition, exercise science, ergogenic aids, anti-aging research you can use today, effective fat loss techniques, women's health and fitness, hormonal therapy, many other topics, subscribe to my Applied Metabolics newsletter. It's at www.appliedmetabolics.com. It averages 30 to 50 pages every month. It's, again, all evidence-based. I also include my 60 years of constant study, and also, experience in the trenches, in the gym. I'm not an armchair philosopher. I've worked out. I know what works and what doesn't work, and all of this is related in my Applied Metabolics newsletter. When you subscribe, I'll send you an invitation to join my private Applied Metabolics Facebook page, where each day I post new information on nutrition, exercise science, and medicine. I also have an email portal on my Applied Metabolics website, where current subscribers only, I don't accept unsolicited questions, can send me short questions about anything they might have read in Applied Metabolics or anything else that comes to mind, as long as they're short questions. And again, subscribe today. You won't be sorry. I guarantee you. There's no publication I know of on the entire internet that can match Applied Metabolics, if I say so myself, and I've seen a lot of them. I'm not going to criticize anyone else. I'm not going to say other publications are garbage. All I'm going to say is that nobody could match the depth of information that I present, and I cover topics that you won't find in some of the other publications, and you won't find on blogs or websites either. They're kind of off the road topics, but they're all practical. In other words, the stuff that you can use. Again, www.appliedmetabolics.com. If you want to have the best friend you'll ever have, Bruno's getting ready to bark. I'm going to have to sign off. Go to your local shelter and adopt a dog. Take care.